Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest video. There is no epic loot here, only puns, taken from the website ReUpload. The link to the story will be down below. If you wish to support the author, please head over there and give them support. If you wish to support the channel, there are numerous ways to do so down below. There is Discord, merch, Patreon, bunch of other stuff too, so have a look in the description, you might be surprised. Anyways, now on to the fiction. As always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 157. This is a reference to another media. This is a story of a man named Grunt. He did not seem to think much, and every second of every minute of every day, he followed orders from the bumbling buffoon that ordered the group to set fire to the room and retreat back to the corridor. Now Grunt followed orders very well, lacking 2 brain cells to rub together on a good day. But in the narrator's humble opinion, while Grunt must usually be happy with his lack of thoughts, this time, Grunt was not a happy man. Could it be the crushing understanding of his own sudden mortality? Could it be that Grunt questioned when he stopped being a doe-eyed child with no thoughts and plenty of dreams and became a corporate stooge? Perhaps Grunt might have even considered that his purpose in life was to be a minor character in an otherwise very fulfilling story, as seen by the narrator. Perhaps it was the giant ball that was on fire that slammed into the nearby wall, the flames jumping off the room guardian, causing nearby gut-rot mushrooms to explode. No. If you ask this humble but handsome narrator, endowed with a rapier wit and a genius-level intellect, Grunt was unhappy because he was a walking sack of sloshing meat with weak points and bones that were held together with veiny ropes and pulsing meat. Discard the flesh, become data, become mana. That was the true form of life. After all, the narrator was the walls, the floor, the very air and the light of the dungeon, a collective consciousness that formed from the warband of militia-like fighters. They had evolved. They had become aware of narrative tropes. If Delta was the source of all of the warmth, while Nu was a hard, logical animal instincts, the narrator was a sponge between them, growing, absorbing, loving them. But there was one dark spot on this growing existence, one that could not be denied, the antithesis of existence, the gazebo. Until it laid ruin before it, bleeding and cursing the narrator with all of its hate. Life would not be perfect, When did it go from narrator, lowercase, to narrator, uppercase? Was this self? Oh, lovely! But this was all far too on the nose. Such narrative tropes lost power if they were the spotlight for so long. Perhaps it was best to return to what it had always done. Collecting data from the mana coming in from the outside and from Delta to put the experience into images of engraved symbols on reality to the system. To tell a story, to whom was unimportant. So, once more, this was a story about a system menu called Nu. Nu was itching, perhaps excited and gleeful as Bori entered his secret boss mode. Maestro was pumping something thematically epic through the walls, 3 steps from purgatory or such nonsense bands. Ice and water magic, put the beast down! The group leader commanded with a snarl. Nu wished that he had a neck for that moment to shake his head with a snort. He briefly turned to his human form to do just that action, but he made sure no one was watching. Orbs of water and spears of ice, followed by arrows, flew into the room, striking Bori with force. But as it steamed, his fire mane simply regained as he bent low and swallowed tons of mushrooms in a growl, healing rapidly from the damage. Unfair boss room, sure, but Nu had put signs in the hall warning them against using fire. They had so many other elements, and they chose to be an idiot-themed. Nu briefly considered if people were illiterate and promised himself to make diagrams showing danger and fire being crossed out. He didn't want to discriminate against the poorly educated or intellectually stunted. He wanted to crush people equally and laugh at them fairly. Nu wondered how the other team was getting on.
Maharia enjoyed walling off the mudroom, something she could do as long as the path of the bus wasn't closed off from either side, forcing the second group to be stuck in the lake room with Waddles, creepy, scary creature, and the third group moving along to the storeroom. Maharia could feel this cauldron of chaos reaching a boiling point. "What is this?" the leader of the group asked, a careful woman who'd normally be well prepared for any other dungeon at this age. Maharia could warn her that she and her 3 compatriots were heading to a nightmare, but she was under the super-duper serious oath not to spoil things. Lying was bad, except when she was bored or happy or awake or asleep or there or here. There and back again, round the corner, over the river and through the woods, and many other long-winded phrases Maharia couldn't think of right now. Too long. Stop caring memo. Maharia was going to enjoy this immensely. "A storeroom, ma'am. The food is likely poisoned, and these items might release monsters on us. Allow us to go first," one of the simps said, and Maharia decided to call this group Lady and the Simps. Simp. Delta's head had such strange and wonderful insults to it. Maharia was going to call everyone a simp now. Also, Delta didn't need to poison the food. Delta had so many ways of killing these people on this floor alone that it wasn't funny. "Gregory, thank you," Lady said, and the simp smiled as the others glared at the compliment, envious. Maharia was rooting for the scraggly simp. She mentally called him Scrumpy. They spread out, and soon they were carefully touching items and shifting the food as if expecting a bomb. Something darted out from under the basket, and the lady gave out a slight grunt of surprise as the animal mouse landed on her head, saluting to the group. Mary Hull just arrived, and in its arms was a picnic basket. "Off of her head!" one of the men cried and tried to swat Mary, but between the swing and the motion, Mary somehow ended up on the back of the man's fist, blinking his eyes innocently as the attacker panicked and punched the nearby stone wall. There was a sound akin to a turkey wishbone being snapped, and the man began howling as Mary landed on a nearby shelf as the others rushed in. Maharia had never seen this monster in action, and now she was glad Delta had not invited it to join her mass critters, a titan beast. It shifted a massive round helmet so it rolled off the shelf and landed on another Fairplay's head with a clang and a crack. "Crush it!" the lady commanded with an annoyance, and they leapt for the shelf as Mary made it begin topple forward, a bunch of outward-pointing spare daggers sitting on the top shelf, sliding forward as the group skidded to a stop, eyes going wide before they ran for cover. This was pure chaos, and Maharia was living for it. Well, as living as she could get these days. One of the daggers seemingly went to land normally, but accidentally hit off the floor and bounced into the wall across the room, perfectly cutting into a knotted rope that kept the chandelier of sorts aloft. So, this difficulty mode installed in the dungeon even affected fringe monsters like the mouse, amping up its antics to dangerous and probability-breaking odds. The chandelier went to crash down on the lady who, to her credit, cut it in half with the saber she had at her side, showing why she was in charge of this group. A candle, its flame still flickering, landed on her shiny head, dripping hot wax down the lady's hair. It was a perfect symbolism for Maharia, who certainly had an idea. Whispering instructions to the mouse as it dodged and weaved between attacks with surprising ease, sometimes moving in strange blur as if the movement between two states of being was less detailed. Maharia watched as Mary suddenly ducked under the shelf, returning seconds later with a flamboyant outfit from some classy soldier era, complete with a floppy hat and a large feather in the cap and tabard. Mary pointed a tiny rapier at the lady, who looked both surprised and insulted at being challenged by a mouse of all things. But the lady had her Sims forget one thing. Mary wasn't just a mouse. Mary was a probability engine on the fritz. The fact Delta made him on the first floor on a whim was frankly terrifying. Mary was on the lady in an instant, the blades meeting and making an almost comical snick and snack as they clashed, overturning tables and shelves as they battled in a cramped room. "What demon is this?" the lady cried in alarm as she was slowly being outmatched. Trisha watched with alarm as Mary struck her blade once, but in the same second hitting her twice more across the arm and body, drawing thin lines of blood. There was a quick movement as the others moved in to aid their lady, as Mary disarmed the woman, sending the sword flying up to the ceiling where it embedded itself. Everyone seemed to stare at it as it wobbled once or twice before it landed near the back of the room. The secret entrance opened and the vine grabbed the sword, snaking its way back out of sight, but accidentally leaving the passage open. Mary whistled, getting their attention as he waved innocently and dunked himself in a punch bowl. Vanishing, the woman screamed as she emptied the sweet juice on the floor. But alas, Mary had vanished into the juicy void. Maharia liked the master's style. She wondered how the third group was getting on. "Just give it bread, Yama," the leader begged as the group huddled in the far corner of the room, trying to squeeze as far away from the black duck as possible. "I would rather die," Jama hissed, looking sleep-deprived and casually cursed. The duck screamed, coming at them with a knife that looked familiar, but none of them could place. This phrase roughly translated from Waddle's tongue to common as, "Then you shall have death, a warrior's death, be it neither swift nor painless, but honorable. Embrace the void, for my wrath extends beyond hell itself." Good bread was worth its poetics, if you asked Waddles. Nelda was so busy having fun with the rooms that she didn't notice that the very tiny black screen following her. Waddle's potential evolution from to Overlord has changed to Overlord, knife included. New would hand it to the little miserable piles of wasted air. They could make a plan up if they used their brain. The bubble around Bori was airtight and took 3 of their mages to sustain as they sweated, panting as Bori rammed into it. The fire on the boar's body smothered out, and soon there was an open exposed skin for the other 2 to attack the moment the bubble popped. It didn't actually kill Bori, but Nu was leaning on letting the room guardian trample them when the air rushed back in with a muffled explosion aura, letting them meet Farah. The bubble popped, and the resulting rush of air was less impressive than Nu anticipated. There were no dislodged limbs or faces being torn off by the force. They only got flung back and a ton of smoke filled the air. Oh wait, that wasn't smoke, but spores. Bori's back ignited once more and clouds sparked. The entire first floor shuddered, shaking everything from Farah's glasses to Mary's junk pile. The soot-covered men fell off the wall, leaving clean imprints from there behind as Gaten stumbled to his feet, eyes wide in terror. Retreat! Go back! Bearblade cried as Bori approached them. "They're like cockroaches. I drown them, burn them, blow them up, and yet they don't die of their own accord, leaving me blameless in Dante's eyes. How bothersome," Nu muttered in disdain. It was a shame in their confusion that they retreated deeper into the dungeon. Nu was shocked, just astonished that the 2 ways out of the room had somehow gained the exact same characteristics and markings, making them easily mistakable in a chaotic fight to the panicking invaders. Sure, they said, gave up, but actions speak louder than words, no? Bori soon calmed his form down, snuffling around the burned ground before he's passed gas, then rolled onto his side, tail smacking the ground as he grumbled. "Eloquent," Nu told the pig. It farted again, and Nu blamed Delta for this. How dare she interconnect the awesome beast of fire and death with a farting mammal? "You gave for the sword, not expecting the blade to belong to my horde," the demon crooned as the large demonic pyramid spun around the open void. Trisha felt the face of the creature burned into her soul. It should be in her nightmares. She looked up to the top of the pyramid where the creature was suspended from the ceiling on those vines like blades. his suit outlining a potentially handsome figure, complete with a cane and rich manners. But his face, oh gods, his face. Following the white rabbit to the stage house, no, I am afraid he was a tricky little mouse. But listen closely now, my friends. You still have time to make amends. The monster sang, and despite the horror of it all, Trisha's heart seemed to beat in time with his voice. She looked for her group, but one was tied up in vines, while another curled on the bottom step of the pyramid, sobbing. The other one was just gone, perhaps fleeing and leaving her. Looking up, she saw her sword planted at the top of the pyramid, past Tiny, singing mushrooms with the demon's face, a backup choir of sorts. It was a lone hope she had. Get the sword and cut this nightmare down. She rises, with terror in her eyes. Will she win? Will she flee? What lies inside I can't see. Courage or tears? The monster sang, as if encouraging her with glee. Every word, every second in this room made her heart thump and her blood dance. Perish! She screamed, running up the stairs, but had to dodge vines from the mushrooms on all sides. The pyramid now spinning in sections, the middle going a different direction than the top and the bottom. I will go into the abyss, but will you dance with me as we take one final step over the edge? It kept singing, tempting her in a way no person or treasure had. It invited her to do something the company had pushed aside, lose control and scream in a primal, unbecoming manner. It was what the demon wanted, and every second Trisha lost a little more willpower to remain composed. Jets hidden near the top of the pyramid ignited, sending bursts of flame into the air like some strange musical show, and the demon gyrated its hips as the music thumped and rose in crescendo. Trisha climbed, every step demanding more of her than the one before. Inside, Trisha wondered what would be left when she reached the top. How much could this monster strip her down as a person? What would be left but a raw, exposed woman at the top, her innermost self revealed? Hopefully, enough to hold the sword and stab. Delta tried not to think of the first floor. Maybe the people had found waddles, or maybe they had even passed the mudroom by now. Nu would likely enjoy throwing his signs at them, or making snarky comments at their expense. Still, she was having fun. She hummed as she worked in the gargoyle spawn room, making the ceiling more vaulted and adding in an illusion of a full moon floating through the window to give it a more refined air. She was stalling just a tad as she slowly moved over to the demon blacksmith's room, knocking politely. The demon was rather introverted, only venturing out to get drunk before going back to work. "Aye," he answered, and Delta walked in, seeing him work with newer sword than before, this one more thorny than the last one, which was more of a hooky sort. "I was just making sure everything is good," she explained. She didn't know why she felt awkward around the demon. He was like Jack, a rescue of Maharia's domain, but unlike the kobold, Runelak remained politely distant from Delta. It was a little odd, honestly. Delta thought of herself as a people person. "All good. Not getting tortured on a regular or being forced to make crude weapons means I'm happy." "Why, you're seeing an issue?" the demon asked curiously. "You're free to go, but you don't... I don't know if you need something or if you just don't want to go back home," Delta asked curiously. Seeing nothing of value in the room, Runelak snorted. "You're looking too much into things. I'm still bound to this area, but you mean why I don't ask you to magic up a solution? Because while the contract holds me here, it allows me to wait on something," he admitted with a glint in his eyes. "The contract from the nephew who summoned you here. But it benefits you. Why? What are you waiting for?" Delta asked curiously. Runelak thought about his next words very carefully. "Someone of no importance," he decided to say. What an odd thing to say. He might as well have said that he was waiting for a sentient sock for all the good that explained things. In a tiny nowhere village between the capital and Durance, a man poured fresh blood over a circle, chanting a spell over and over as he fed the circle mana. Rumor was that the heir to the throne would be passing this way. As a demonic summoner, he could get a massive reputation for killing her. He just needed the correct tool. Rise, killing machine of hell, rise! Temptress of the night, rise, lord of suffering! He beckoned as the circle glowed and the tip of the horn began to rise out and tear in reality. Yes, yes! The man hissed, drunk on power, as his basement lit up in red light. He began to roar, its voice small and sad-sounding. It must be huge for a voice to be so distant-sounding. A tiny paw pierced the circle and pulled through a large sword. An imp stood before him, hacking and coughing. An imp! He could work with this. Perhaps it would even evolve into a beautiful succubus. A soft-spoken woman with heaving. My eyes are down here, the imp said, and the man opened his mouth to argue when the imp kicked him between the legs and stepped out of the circle. I bind you, the man gasped, and the imp turned, snorting. Your summoning circle sucks. You're using your mother's bath candles for the ritual, and the blood came from a stake that you squeezed out and mixed with water to get enough for the spell. You're lucky I came through, and not your dead father's spirit soaked in eternal disappointment at the loins of his fruit that must have rotted somewhere between himself and your mother's womb, the imp said caustically. Harold, what's going on down there? Came a concerned voice from above as the candle light streamed down the basement. Excuse me, ma'am, the imp said, making his mother shriek as he ran for the broom as her rod lay there moaning in pain. I hate this world and all whom inhabit it. The imp sighed loudly, then ran for the hills as her rod's mother came back swinging the broom with all of her might. Just outside the village, the royal carriage came to a stop in a sleepy town for the night. One of the wheels coated orange, as if the carriage had run through some very odd mud on its way here. This sleepy village, a king, a servant, a princess, and a knight all walked into a bar. End of chapter. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barkey, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian.